You will be joined in listen-only mode.
So I'm going to do a good chunk of this through whiteboard, and hopefully you'll find this effective. Very curious to see your feedback at the end of this, so please don't be shy in emailing me or texting me or whatever. So what exactly do we mean by Platform 3? Now you've heard a lot about this because David Goulden has talked about it, Joe Tucci's talked about it. It's really the systematic shift we're seeing in the market from mainframe-based computation, which is called the first platform, and by the way, all this comes from IDC, this is IDC terminology, to client-server, which was the second platform revolution. LAN-based, internet-based, two-tier, three-tier architectures. But what fundamentally changed in the last several years is that a new set of use cases have emerged, especially with the advent of mobile technologies to start to move the industry in a very different way. So that, coupled with the movement towards cloud computing technologies, is what's really driving what IDC calls the third platform. And there's a host of innovations in this. New kinds of data stores, new ways of doing computation, new use cases, and new forms of collaboration emerging, and we'll be exploring this world quite a lot. I expect to have this series go on for the rest of the year, once every couple of weeks or so. IDC's predictions are that this third platform, social, mobile, cloud, big data, and the analytics associated with it will be dominating growth, and that'll be up by 15%, driving 29% of the 2014 IT spending, and about 89% of the growth that we see. Platform 1, Platform 2 have been our mainstays for many years, but now it's time to move forward into this new market, and no company, I believe, is better positioned than EMC at this point to take advantage of this. We have in our assets as a federation the best possible platform to capture this market, but as I said in my invite, the idea is to get to the field first and be the first movers in this field. So the third platform will necessarily cannibalize a little bit of the second platform, especially with cloud-based computing technologies, some of which may be off-prem. That cloud spending will increase by 25% in the fields of infrastructure as a service and platform as a service, and we'll be spending a lot of time differentiating between those two to understand what we have in that space and what these terms really mean. And only 0.7% growth is in legacy platforms. So as you might imagine, if we stick to our Platform 1 and Platform 2 routes alone, this will be an issue going forward. So Platform 1, Platform 2 still are 90% of our revenue, so we absolutely cannot lose market share there. And our share there is roughly 30% in the storage space, and that should be growing. But let's not lose sight of the fact that tomorrow's growth is going to come from Platform 3. So what does this really mean? And a big thanks to Greg Kuss for putting this slide together. And Platform 1 is traditionally the mainframe, or OpenVMS or ICDs. And we'll go through some of the architectural details over there. Platform 2 is more traditional commercial off-the-shelf software, what they call COTS. That's the SAPs, the Oracles, the Microsofts, working in a client-server environment with Windows, Linux, and Unix clients. And there's a whole bunch of focus areas there that us as systems engineers have to look at. This is pretty much our bread and butter. This is EMCII at its best. But the third platform now is a bold move into the mobile, cloud, big data, social type arena, where new development methodologies like Agile start to play a very critical role. Well, new ways of being able to formulate solutions using these components start to come into play. And so we'll hear a lot about Hadoop and infrastructure as a service. VBlocks, of course, we know, but Viper, VCHS, all of these things start to have new meaning in this new world. So much work will be done over here. So even though much of our sales is in the first two platforms, the future growth is definitely in Platform 3, and the idea is to start to attack this. There's plenty more information on this on EMC1, so please do read it as you get a chance to. There's plenty of stuff I can send to you as well. So if we take a step back and say, what do we have as a portfolio? Now, as a federation, we have 3 companies. pivotal for next generation cloud, big data, and fast data. VMware in the virtualization, abstraction, management, and orchestration stack. And then, of course, EMC-II with storage, backup recovery, etc. This depicts the kind of stack one might use for a private cloud. As you can see, it can easily federate out to an external service provider cloud, and we'll be coming back to this because this is what we monetize, folks. But to be able to monetize this, we need to, A, understand the technologies on the top layer. What is Gemfire? What is Cloud Foundry? What's Spring? What's Greenplum? What does Agile mean? We also need to understand and learn how to have conversations about this with our customers. The stakeholders for that layer are no longer the CIO and his or her reports. They are often in the lines of business. They're often not the people who deal with infrastructure. In fact, a lot of infrastructure people are sometimes threatened by these kind of things. So we need to find ways to be able to have the correct conversations with them and bring to bear our technical expertise in this so the value proposition for dealing with EMC as a federation starts to become apparent as much as possible. So let's switch modes a little bit and start to go to, whiteboards. And like I said, this is the first time I've been working with these kind of technologies, so, would certainly appreciate your patience as I learn to navigate through this whole thing. So what we're going to do here is to systematically go through and build out a couple of things over here to help us understand how to approach this world well. So in this session, I want to go through, broadly speaking, Platform 1 and Platform 2. To understand where we want to go, I think we need to first understand where we came from. So let's start with Platform 1. And this is, as we said, oops, my bad, guys. And this is the platform which we commonly know as mainframe. Right? So how does mainframe really work? So what we have is a large machine, which is often called a mainframe, but it's characterized by running databases such as DB2, with CICS as transaction monitors. By the way, there's a bunch of terms we'll throw around here which will demystify as the series goes around. So don't worry if you don't understand all these terms. That's exactly what this is all about. Other kind of data structures like VSAM, you'll hear terms like database, or alternatively IMS, IDMS, etc. The client in this picture is actually rather simplistic. This is a 3270 emulation platform, often called a green screen. And connecting these two is usually a simple link running a network protocol such as SNA. And the point to note over here is that in this particular world, all the logic is usually done right here at the mainframe level, okay? So logic sits here. And the coding is done in typically COBOL. These are strong batch processing environments, so the job control language, or JCL, is used over here, and these are batch-oriented systems. They will do transaction-oriented system with CICS and DB2, but a lot of it goes through batch. The data structures are static. You set them up once, and you really don't modify them too much. At the bottom of all this, there's this thing that we know and love, which we call DASD. Right? This is where we made a lot of money as a company historically. You'll hear terms like HSM or SMS, which are management disciplines on the mainframe side. Up here, what we have at the client layer is largely presentation logic. And these presentations are really no more than dumb terminals, and that's really what we focus on for the most side over here. This is also usually called a two-tier architecture because there are two tiers. There's the client, and then there's a server, which is the mainframe. So in that sense, This isn't a radically different concept from what you might see in open systems or client servers. But there is, as time has gone on, this system has become very, very sophisticated. So you have things like MQ series for stuff to communicate, and you have, the ultimate of IBM's WebSphere applications suite also. And all of this can be run on a mainframe and does communicate with the mainframe over here. So some of the things to note over here, which are about this kind of an architecture, and I should mention one thing. I'm a big mainframe fan. Mainframes are remarkable in their capabilities. I've yet to see systems management which is that mature, but it's been around for 40 years and it shows. But they are widely touted as monolithic, which is as one single vendor who manages the whole stack. That's where everything goes on. But they're extremely reliable. Most of the major banks in the world rely almost completely on mainframes to be able to do their computing. So that makes them very expensive. And this is what turned people off a lot, saying, oh my God, I got to give all my money to IBM that I keep paying over and over again for the same thing. The kind of logic that it takes to be able to build programs, which is a bunch of COBOL programmers writing code, sometimes in COBOL, sometimes in assembler running on these mainframes, also made it very tough to change. And this, as you might imagine, is a real liability in the modern world where agility is everything, right? But let's make no mistake, these are very powerful systems and they absolutely deserve full respect and credit. Now these static structures over here, they give rise to some strange issues. Now what this means is that, the data structures here tend to be relational, which is that you got to stick everything into a row and a column. There is not much room for, amorphous data types like text, large text documents or images or anything like that, and often in flat file structures. This makes them efficient, it makes them fast, but at the end of the day, client server was born because largely people felt that, oh my God, this is really expensive, it's proprietary hardware, and it is not at all flexible. There's only one way to do stuff, and that's the only way to do it. So you look at this and say, well, was there a different way to do this? And that really brings us into the world of, Platform 2. So what we do with Platform 2 is, this is the so-called client-server revolution, right? And what happened in client-server was people realized that I could do a fair amount of stuff by just using more or less commodity components, not necessarily the mainframe processors. And people looked at things like Unix servers. Unix had a huge resurgence, and all of us, most of us at least, have worked with Solaris and all those kind of things. And client server was Platform 2. And client server is really very similar model in some sense to what the mainframes had. It started with a client, and it started with a server. And what we did with the client and server was something different, though. On the client side, people wrote lots and lots of code, and to make very highly intelligent clients, which could take data from the back and do all kinds of marvelous things with it. So you'd see clients written C++, or Visual Basic, or in some cases, there was a whole industry of tools to write these, like Power Builder. Remember that, guys? Or Borland, C++. It used to be a time when we could make hundreds of thousands of dollars if you knew Power Builder. And those days are gone, right? On the server side, you started to go towards open systems databases, common ones we all know and love. Oracle, SQL Server, UDB, Sybase. We had other guys like Ingress and Postgres and all that also lurking around in the background. But there was more to it than just that. I mean, as time went on, things got a little smarter, and people started to realize that the HTTP revolution had started, and you started to get web clients. Initially, they were kind of dumb. They did HTML display, and that's all they really did. But, you know, they got better as time went on. People write code in Java, active server pages, you know, JavaScript. We started to hear terms like SOAP and REST. And if you're wondering about all of these terms, don't worry, we'll be doing plenty of drill downs over here. For the most part, clients and servers spoke in the protocol known as TCP/IP. But stuff got complex. There were thousands and thousands of clients and hundreds of servers, and it just didn't make sense to have point-to-point connections between all these things. So a new industry was born in the middle, and like the name suggests, it was called middleware. And middleware is this wonderland where you can get lost in, because there's so much over there. And what middleware, you know, common examples are, people will talk about WebSphere, right? Remember the WebSphere we saw from before? Same thing here, except adapted to open systems. You'll hear stuff like Tuxedo and WebLogic, which is now owned by Oracle, by BEA Software. You heard terms like Java Enterprise Edition, or JEE, or J2EE, and then other terms like web services cropped up over here, and you heard things like Enterprise Java Beans. And these were strange terminology, but at the end of the day, you know, client talked to the middleware, middleware talked to the server using TCP/IP. Middleware typically talked to these things also using the same kind of protocols, and this made it very flexible and easy to use. But there are a couple of things to note about these platforms. First of all, the clients tended to be fat. Fat meaning a lot of code, heavy, hard to change. They typically ran on PCs or sometimes Unix workstations. Web clients were a little better. They were sort of thin, and, you know, they could do a lot of stuff, and they were platform independent. But, you know, still, you know, with the logic built into them was usually through Java or something like that, the logic was fairly light. The middle layer over here was something which we refer to as mediation. So if multiple things wanted to talk to each other, the middleware acted as the translation layer. So you could have web services conversations happening between the client and the middleware, and then the middleware could be talking, you know, to the database at the back end using a different set of protocols. The mediation layer basically made the logic work, and it made all the applications work together. So much of the application logic actually was contained over here as well. As you may imagine, as complex transactions grew and multiple databases had to be touched, we had to deal with the fact that, you know, that logic had to be cleanly federated across the infrastructure, and middleware was used to be able to do that. And they also abstracted some of the complexities of this kind of a setup to the end user as well as the client. So the back end, you know, stuff in the databases was obfuscated or abstracted from the end user. This, for the server side, the databases were the data persistence layer. Now I'm saying, I'm using the past tense over here. Keep in mind that one of the things to note is a lot of these technologies do go through onto Platform 3 as well. As I said, it's not a ground-up redefinition of the technology stack. Absolutely, there are some differences and changes, but a lot of it is really along the lines of, you know, what new use cases are really supported in here. SQL was the lingua franca, which was spoken over here, and all the data was structured, which means I could stick it into rows and columns. And this is a very interesting kind of things, and the data types were rather fixed. You could have a few kinds. You could have character fields, you could have numbers, you could have floating points. But that's really all that you could really come up with. And the thing was, you could have hundreds of these in a typical enterprise. You could have thousands of these in here, and that made the whole sort of, this kind of combination extremely interesting to say the least. But what's probably more important than what the base architecture is for these things is really the realization that there's a new set of principles for designing these things. So the Platform 2 design principles are somewhat different from what you usually have. And to understand this, let's look again at what happens in the client-server world, where I got a client. Let me change the color a little bit here. And the server and the middleware. So I have the client and the middleware and the server. And now these guys, from a logical level, communicated either through an API or an application programming interface, or through web services, or through plain old HTTP. While the middleware generally talked to the back-end databases through something called ODBC, Open Database Connectivity, which was really the way for an application to talk directly to a database. It's taking the SQL commands or structured query language commands directly to the database. The logic here was actually fixed, as was the case over here at the bottom, because you had static structures and you had what we call create the schema, or what the data model is, or who owns the data model at design time. And these end up in a lot of kind of limitations which you have over here. So this kind of fixed logic, which is also done at design time on the application, and if it was written in a proprietary language such as C++, by proprietary I mean a compiled language like C++, that would mean that this whole architecture again became hard to change. And what that meant was that, and by the way, this has ended up in a lot of very important movements in the industry effectively failing. Some of you may have heard of things like Distributed Computing Environment, or DCE, and many of you probably have scars from CORBA, Common Object Request Broker architecture. So these are where you went to a world of all objects, but the problem with that was that each time you changed an object, you had to change the libraries on the client. So it made it very intractable to work with, and ultimately these things failed. Now in the middle of all this, middleware became very, very complex, and people started to introduce things like enterprise service buses. Most of you have heard the term SOA, which is supposed to be the answer to world hunger, but in many cases SOA has failed just because of the sheer complexity being able to do this. And we'll talk more about ESBs and SOAs and why they're interesting and important. All of those things came over here, and here again there was enormous inflexibility, hard to change. Is really the repeated theme over here. What that meant was that you paid a price when it came to agility. You were constantly battling between transaction processing workloads called referred to as OLTP, online transaction processing, versus decision support or data warehousing. This required aggregation of OLTP workloads to do decision support, so which means you literally had to create a different database and a different set of data structures to be able to do this. This is still a pain that most corporations face today, and this is constantly a real difficult thing to deal with. And last but not the least, you have to deal with federation, which means that a single business transaction could be reflected in multiple updates to atomic databases. So multiple databases took part in this, and the application logic became harder and harder to do and more difficult to be able to put into practice. So federation also started to kill it. Now, to make applications like this work was not an easy thing. What that meant was that you fundamentally had to design stuff in a very different way. The traditional way of designing was you gather requirements, and then you design your code, your application, and then you code each unit, and then you do unit testing, and then you did integration testing, and then you did regression testing, which is you stress test the whole thing. And then on one day when everything was just right, you decided that I'm going to do the dreaded upgrade to my code, or the first installation of the new code. And this was a very high-risk event. And usually this kind of process took anywhere from 6 to 12 months to do, and then you make a huge change because they've changed a whole bunch of stuff, and all kinds of things break, and you spend the next 6 months redoing everything that you did or fixing all the problems that you had, and ultimately you end up in something which is very difficult to manage, and you start the whole 6 to 12 month cycle again. 6 to 12 months these days doesn't cut it, guys. That's really it. So you gave up agility, and you gave up scale, the ability to scale, and provisioning in an infrastructure like this was extremely difficult as well. So all of this really means that this frankly sucks, right? Really no redeeming factors about this thing. And not to mention that, costs a huge amounts of money to maintain and upgrade. So there's got to be a better way. And that's really what Platform 3 is all about, is to start to take some of these ideas but to extend them on to something else. By the way, I should mention that this technique of coding, where you go in a monolithic fashion, because you can see it's a cascaded process over here, where you systematically go from one step to the next. Because of this, this is called a waterfall method of coding, and we will talk more about what coding methodologies are. Okay? So we'll look at all of this and say, all right, how do we really want to do all this, and does it really make sense? So what we've covered so far, we've looked at some of the rationale for why we look at at stuff like this. We say, hey, that's Platform 1, mainframe, DB2 kicks. We know it, we love it, monolithic, reliable, but real expensive, tough to change. And we looked at what some of the basics were for client server. Thick, fat clients, some newer technologies like web-based technologies coming in, lots and lots of middleware, difficulty in coding in these kind of stacks, and a back-end persistence layer which is purely relational databases and structures. Inflexible because of the fixed nature and the fact that rows and columns were primarily what was supported over here. And then we looked at what some of the design principles for this were. So enterprise service buses, all the logic done at design time, not at runtime, hard to change, And the way you code it just did not lend itself to easy, working with any kind of agility. People today want applications to be developed on the fly. Just a quick anecdote. I mean, companies like Facebook do 4 production releases of production code every day. Google encourages their brand new first-time employees to release production code on the day they join. And the reason they can do that is because they code very, very differently, and they manage everything very, very differently. There are a lot of lessons to be learned from that, and that is some of the basic stuff for why Platform 3 is really so interesting. So I've thrown a huge amount of stuff at you guys, right? I've given you all kinds of terms. We've talked about things like, JEE. Oops, why did I blank out over here? Well, I don't know quite what I did wrong over here. Just a second. Okay, there we go. We looked at terms like JEE and ESBs and SQL. All these are Platform 2 terms, by the way. .NET, Corba, Tuxedo. The terms go on. ODBC. This is the alphabet soup that we have to deal with at all these times. SOAP, REST, and I could just keep going on, but really, you could draw, there's a big bag of tricks over here. That's my bow over here. Now, for us at EMCII, for the most part, this spells Swahili. Right? It's like, oh my God, what are you doing to me? I was comfortable in the world of SIMs and VNXs and, data domain. I even understood concepts like deduplication and stuff like that, but this is a new world altogether. And our goal is not to teach you Swahili, We don't want to learn Swahili. What we really want to do is to learn to say, and dare I say, EMCP3 in Swahili. So no one is going to emerge from this an expert on what Platform 3 style technologies are. And we've only brushed the surface right now with, what Platform 2 is at this point. And the Platform 3 bag is a lot more complex. We'll be adding a whole bunch of other terms to this, like HDFS and Hadoop and Gemfire and Cloud Foundry. And these are all things we can absolutely sell and monetize today. We'll be talking about MNO stacks, about VCAC, and a whole series of other technologies around this. An unbelievably exciting world we are entering in. Agile methodologies as opposed to waterfall type techniques. What does all this mean? Spring, what's the language? What's a framework? What's the difference between the two? Why is it so interesting? Why are our customers adopting this? So we're going to go through all of this together, guys. And it's going to take us some time. I'm going to try to break one concept at a time. I've promised the sales guys that I will do no more than 3 core concepts in one session because they said they refuse to absorb any more. And we'll try to keep these to about half an hour to 40 minutes each. And then at the end of which, I'd like to open up for Q&A, and let's get as deep as we want to. These sessions will be recorded, and we can work and try to break these up into snippets, which is what I'd like to do. A whole bunch of this, as you can see, is not really related to anything proprietary in EMC. It's basic industry knowledge. But the goal is to enable you to have, at least at a cocktail party level, with everybody slightly buzzed and a drink in their hands, to have a reasonable conversation with our customers and our peers and our partners so we can establish our credibility in this field, and the fact that we have some of the best value propositions going to be able to do this. So back to where we started out with, this is about the stack that the EMC Federation has. We have gems in our portfolio, such as Greenplum, and Pivotal, and Spring, and Cloud Foundry, and Gemfire, and a host of wonderful Platform 1 and Platform 2 technologies. So let's never lose sight of that. But at the same time, with VMware and us, along with the other things we have from the big data, fast data arena, I think we can kill this market, and this is what we really are out to get to. So please give me feedback on this. If this format works for you, or you'd rather have PowerPoints, I'm happy to go and make slides, or have someone else make slides and borrow them. But I think we'll get a lot more done on whiteboards than we ever do on PowerPoints. So I'm going to open up the bridge right now for comments. So jump in and ask anything you like, or let me know if this was useful or not, or whether you think this plan is okay. I will publish a curriculum for the rest of the year, so we will know which topics we have, and we will try to aggregate them on EMC1 as well as on YouTube and provide you an index to search these topics. If the topics are cleanly separable, I'll separate them into smaller videos so you can have this as a refresher course if you want to refresh your mind on what you want to do. Right? Well, guys, thanks a lot. I think it's about, roughly 40 minutes into the hour, which is just what I wanted to end. So I'm going to open up for questions at this point. All right? Hey, can you guys hear me? Can't hear anybody.
I can hear you. Can you hear us?
Yeah. Okay, yeah, I heard somebody on the line. Okay, good. Any questions, guys?
I'll ask you a question. First of all, I'll say thank you. That was. I'd rather watch somebody do PowerPoint or do the whiteboards than PowerPoints all day long. So it just keeps you engaged. So I would encourage that continues on. As we start talking about Platform 1, 2, 3, and how quickly do you think they're going to adopt the P3? Are we looking at a year? Are we looking at 3 years? Are we looking at 10 years? I mean, and how many people will come along and how quickly?
Okay, the question was, and this was Rick Otten asking the question, was first of all, he endorsed the let's do the whiteboard type format just because it's easier to keep attention on what's being said. And then he asked the question, how quickly do we think that Platform 3 is going to be adopted in our marketplace at this point? I would wager that 70% of our customers already have Platform 3 initiatives. We are likely not talking to them actively about it, but someone in their line of business is looking at mobile, social, cloud, and big data. Whether or not they're doing it with their IT departments or not, that's a different question. The reason is because to stay competitive in this market space, almost regardless of what industry sector you're in, you can look at financials, you can look at healthcare, you can look at retail, you can look at manufacturing. Everybody is offering web and mobile access to their end users and customers and their supply chain, which automatically tells you that that's the whole slew of Platform 3 technologies right there. No one's volume of data is growing any less. All of us have structured data. Almost everybody is doing something about doing analytics with structured data, what we call, reporting or descriptive analytics. But many of them are seeing their unstructured data types, which they have to take into account, and they have to move to predictive analytics, which requires a different set of technologies. We'll discuss that a lot when we talk about technologies like Greenplum and Hadoop and Hawk. So I would think that the adoption is already here today. The vendor space is fragmented, so I don't think any clear leader has emerged, and that is really our opportunity at this point. And I think that if we go into this space aggressively, we have a way to make a very solid impact very quickly. Does that answer your question?
Absolutely.
Rick?
Yeah.
Any other questions, guys? So what do you think of this format?
I got a couple of folks were eyeing me while you were speaking, and they love it.
Okay, good.
They're eating up. I have a question around just maybe your comments. If you looked at Platform 1, bloated and expensive, inflexible. Platform 2 was the new panacea, right? It was going to take care of Platform 1.
Yep.
It became complicated, bloated, and expensive. How do you think Platform 3 is going to end up?
That's a good question. Right now, there's a huge amount of technology which is entering the Platform 3 market. Platform 3 is characterized quite a bit by open source. I think you can see that when you look around you, right? The core operating system platforms are decisively, shifting towards Linux and Windows to a certain extent, but very, very much Linux. x86-based computation rules. But then when you look at the different ways of solving problems, there are literally hundreds and hundreds of tools in the ecosystem which is geared to attack the kind of problems that Platform 3 brings from a computational standpoint. So it's a very fragmented market space in that sense. I expect that anarchy will rule for a while, that there'll be one-upmanship by every major vendor and the hundreds and hundreds of startups that are there in the space who will be vying for the dollars from enterprise customers to be able to go into the space. I believe the winners will be the ones who obfuscate that completely and simplify the consumption of Platform 3 technologies. So in some sense, the people who offer strong cloud infrastructure as a service and strong platform as a service offerings, which simplify the complexity of developing and deploying and scaling in these kind of markets, will be the ones who will ultimately emerge as the market winners. Because at the end of the day, the reason why Platform 2 became unwieldy is because everybody tried to build their own little snowflake in their utopia. And we just had a blizzard in the number of unique architectures that were developed for each unique application with a complete lack of standards. I think we're going to go to a very regimented infrastructure as a service from a standards perspective, and a very standards-based and regimented consumption model through platform as a service in this space. So, but in the meantime, yeah, it's going to be a dogfight, in my opinion. Any comments on that?
No. Where are you going to keep the whiteboards that you do so that if we want to go back for consumption or if we want to re-listen to something as we do in the future, where are they going to be?
We'll be putting all of these on EMC1. When Mark Dietrich was here, he created a portal for the competitive webcasts. So we'll be using the same portal to upload these videos as they become available. Or if they are archived in WebEx for indefinitely, then I might just provide a link instead, and that might be an easy way to do it. And that's for internal consumption. We would like to, if I get my hands on the recordings, split these up into smaller segments, maybe 5 or 10 minute chunks. I'm a big believer that no matter how complex the topic is, you should be able to explain it simply in about 5 minutes. That's not my idea, that's actually Einstein's idea. So I will borrow freely from that. Me, Einstein, what's the difference, right?
I just did that because I could only handle about 10 minutes.
Yeah, I'm just a Nobel Prize away from that, that's all. So I will, we will try to break these up into smaller segments and upload those as well. And obviously the actual whiteboards themselves, the final products, I can save and I can email it to people or put it in a presentation.
We talked about this a little bit. I mean, there isn't any information here that you did on the whiteboard that's proprietary. A good way to do some branding for the EMC would be to put it on YouTube.
I totally agree. I think the Young Minds brand needs to get out on YouTube. We can try to restrict it, but frankly, there's nothing here which is like great. I'm not really expecting too many hits. I'm not expecting to be the next Gangnam Style on YouTube, but you know. But maybe if I did a dance, I could get as many hits as Chad does.
Have a dance for the next one.
We'll have it later, Chad.
Yeah, we'll do one for the next one too. All right. Anybody on the phone? Any comments or questions?
Hey, Kartik, this is Tom Sprecher. Are you able to hear me?
Yeah, man, I can hear you, Tom. Go ahead.
Okay, great. Hey, first off, I think while you're hearing maybe some of the radio silence, I believe you've got everybody's line still muted. I've been able to and unmuted myself. That could be part of the silence, other than just sheer awe of your presentation.
You can press star 6.
Yeah, go ahead, Tom.
Yeah, so I heard something last week that at least kind of put something in perspective for me. So I wanted to bounce it off of you and see if I'm thinking the right way, if I heard something good. And it was really saying that at least for us, the move from Platform 2 to Platform 3 is really almost nothing to do with our product set, but it's 100% due to how our product set is going to be consumed. And to me, I heard that, and it sort of resonated that, you know, this isn't, we're not having to throw out the baby with the bathwater. This is really about a consumption model. Is that a really fair way to look at it?
I agree, Tom. I really think that we don't lack anything in the products or the technologies to be able to fully adopt the Platform 3 revolution. I can point to some significant wins in our division. A lot of the work that's been done at State Farm, for example, was full-scale adoption of Platform 3 technologies. And this started, what, 2 years ago, Greg? Or let's look at Monsanto out in St. Louis with John Crane and Dave Rogers and a fantastic team over there. Actually sold them Cloud Foundry, and they are going to do the first phase of the development on Amazon. Let's embrace the cloud. It's fine, you know? So I don't believe we lack anything in the stack. What we lack is the base information to go and discuss with our customers, and probably more importantly, the line of sight to the lines of business owners who actually will consume these technologies, in my opinion. And I'm very interested in other people's opinion on this as well. That I think we can give you information and instruction on how to put these pieces together, but at the end of the day, we're not going to be selling this to the director of storage or the VP of infrastructure or even maybe the CIO. The LOBs are the ones who are really shying away from their local IT and their CIO organization, saying you're not fast enough, you're not cheap enough, you're not agile enough for me. I need to do things a different way, and they're going to external cloud providers. So I would agree with that statement, Tom. Any other comments on that? I'm going to try star 5 one more time. And
Kartik,
Kartik, if you go to the meeting center and go to I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I just want to thank Kurt, Mike Lepore. I wanted to add star 6 gets you unmuted. The one I wanted to add to your agenda was just a little bit of competitive stuff, because I think any marketing guy worth his salt is going to put the word cloud and agile in the existing tools that they use today. And I think, you know, there's a lot of complacency, or, you know, I'm very comfortable with WebSphere. Why wouldn't I use that for Platform 3? So we kind of need to know a little bit about what really does it mean to scale or deploy in the new world versus the old world. So if you could add that, you know, maybe even just 5 minutes to each topic. Appreciate it, and thanks for this.
I think, yeah, thanks, Mike. I think that's a great idea. Absolutely will. Keep in mind that the competitors we face in Platform 3 are very, very different from the competitors we faced in Platform 1 and Platform 2. Here we will be facing Amazon head-on. We will be facing Google head-on. We'll be facing, you know, giants in the industry, but in a different sense. We'll be facing IBM and Oracle from the application standpoint, and believe me, they are pretty competent in what they do, and they all have very full stacks. So, totally agree. We'll draw out as much of competitive flavor on this as needed. Somebody else had a question?
Yeah, hey, Carter, Scott up there.
Oh, hey, Todd.
Hey, I'm just curious. Number one, love the whiteboard format. Been trying to figure out how to do that with customers for years and never found a good way. I was just curious how you were. Was that all mouse movements, or you have it hooked up to a tablet or something?
No, I had it hooked up to a Wacom tablet, man. I'll send you a URL. It's on Amazon, $200. Can't beat it. It's wonderful stuff.
Okay, perfect. Thanks. Carter?
Okay. But by the way, I should say Inside Sales has been using this forever. Thanks to Katie Rio for pointing out that, hey, this can be done. So young minds, She's truly a young mind. Yeah, go ahead.
Yep, Kartik, Brian Lewis. Again, just want to say, like everybody else, great whiteboard. And like you, I would rather use a whiteboard than a PowerPoint any day. So I'm glad that the Wacom worked out for you. In our next, as we go forward, and at this point now, we've discussed the platforms, talking to the customers. At this point, we'll listen to them and hear what it is that they're interested in trying to achieve for their end goal. The next logical step, do you agree, would be then to break down the building blocks that they need underneath it. What I'm getting at is that every time that I've talked about Platform 3, the question always comes up as, okay, here's what I'm trying to achieve, and what do I need underneath it as an infrastructure to support it? And there seems to be a lot of miscommunication between the various groups and teams as to what components are required. You know, whether it's VCAC, or do you not need it, or can Bosch talk directly to, you know, to the ESX servers, et cetera. So I would think that would be another logical step in the whiteboard process. Would you agree with that?
And you're absolutely right, Brian. There are many ways, because the same way as a VBlock is not infrastructure as a service, you know, VCAC and App Director are not platform as a service. And there's a fine line of distinction which can get confused very easily. And part of all this has to do with what management and orchestration stacks people use, and there are choices. Joe Tucci structured the federation in a specific way, I think, for a very good reason. He said we want to maintain the independence of VMware, EMC, and Pivotal from each other, because we should be allowed to pursue our own destinies by ourselves, even though together we're unbreakable and unshakable. So there will be times when we will, and we are dealing with campaigns right now where service mesh has emerged as something a customer might prefer to VCAC, and in that case we respect that. You know, and so there could be areas of overlap, there could be areas of conflict as we go forth with the federation. But I think at the end of the day, the customer wins. But good point. I will draw out where those areas of synergy and possible conflict are as we go on. And this becomes particularly interesting even as we include Cisco as a partner, because they have their own orchestration stacks as well. And that complicates matters a little bit. But the way we should always look at it is put the customer first, always. And do the right thing for the customer, even if it comes at the expense of a transaction on our side. I think long-term, the strategic direction will be that we will win. The customer will notice that, and they'll trust us. And that's the end game here. The customer should trust us.
Excellent. Thank you, Kartik. And then lastly, I do happen to still have a copy of Power Builder in the box. If you'd like, I could drop it off at your desk.
Dude, you are truly dating yourself, man. All right. Good luck to you. I don't even think you can get a dime on it on eBay. But, okay. All right, guys. We're winding to a close. I'll entertain one last question, and then we'll knock it off for today. Okay? Any final thoughts? Okay, no final desires. Then thank you guys all for attending. As soon as I figure out how to upload the videos, I will, or send you a link. And 2 weeks from now, we'll have the next edition. This one was on a Tuesday because Monday was a holiday. The next one will be on a Monday, 2 p.m., and that's the cadence I hope we'll be able to continue. All right, folks, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Bye.